Hi art friends, it's Mrs. Price here, and I just wanted to pop in with a quick tutorial to help you finish up your Maori artwork, and I hope you've liked it so far. And the focus of how we're going to finish this and add our color is really going to be focused on saturation, which is the intensity or the amount of the color that we see, especially in Raywin Harris's artwork. So when we look at her art, we are just amazed by how much color impacts she has, or how much amazing color she is able to apply onto her art itself. So that's really what we're going to focus on today. So before we get started, I would recommend or tell you to maybe gather some of the things that you've been working with. And if you have paint that you are allowed to use, or you have markers, that's amazing because that's actually the most vibrant. I don't happen to have the right paint around. I mainly have watercolors. So I'm going to be focusing more on my shading techniques and using more of oil pastels and especially crayons. And I figured crayons and colored pencils are things we all have around right now. So that's where I'm going to focus most of my technique that I work on today. If you color it in with paint and with marker, it's automatically just going to be vibrant. So you don't have to focus so much on these techniques. So that's why I'm sharing this in case you're like me and you're working with your crayons. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now, usually when we use crayons in class, we're shading larger areas. And when we use the crayon, we, tap it onto the paper and we shade lightly from side to side. Now today we're going to be holding, you'll see I'm going to hold it a little more like a pencil, and I want to apply more pressure to the paper so that color really comes out and it's more vibrant and it's more noticeable. Okay, so that's really what we're going to think about today. So let's take a look at my koru, and I mentioned to you that I did my outline in Sharpie so that you can see it better on camera. So it may look a little bit different than yours because I did ask you to start in pencil. Now, to just mention that very quickly, if you do end up wanting to go over your artwork in a black marker or an outline, my recommendation, what I would say to do, is to color almost to the edges and leave a little tiny bit of space where you can still see your pencil mark. That way you can still go over it in black crayon or any kind of black marker, okay? Because that sometimes is hard to go over crayon and get it seen, okay? So just to go over that. Now I started out with a green for my oil pastel right here, and I decided to go over because I liked the color of my crayon better. So these are just my twistable crayons. And what I did was I started to go over my koru with my crayon. And as you can see, I'm holding it much more like a pencil, okay? And I'm pressing down pretty well on there because I really want a nice smooth texture with as much color as I can. So you'll see right there, the texture is pretty smooth. A lot of times when we color, I'll show you here, we have more of a rough texture. You can actually see, where your shading happens, more like that, okay? That's a typical, usual way that we shade. But in this case, like I said, we're taking it more like we hold a pencil, like we're going to write our letters, and we're going to really go in on that page and make sure every little bit is covered, except to the very edge if you did want to go back over it with your marker, okay? So I'm really pressing quite hard, a lot of pressure so that I can make sure that the color is as strong as possible, okay? And you really don't see a lot of my marks from the crayon. It's pretty blended in. Okay? Another thing that I want to share with you is that I happen to use similar colors to our inspiration pictures because I really like the green and the purple. They're some of my favorite colors. And you're welcome to use your favorite colors. So any of your favorite colors that you want to put onto your koru, you are welcome to try. Even if it makes it not look like it's natural, even if you wanted to make it look pretty interesting and fun and not like something you'd see in real life, that's okay too. So if you wanted to do, for instance, a purple koru, that's perfectly all right. I'd like to see that. Now, speaking of purple, I am going to show you two things that you can do. So for instance, I have these lines up here as an example, and I just went back and forth and made a little pattern, okay, with my darker purple and more of this pinkish purple, this magenta, okay? So I'm just going over that little pattern here and going back and forth between those. Now, another choice that I'll give you is something called a gradient. okay? And all that means is that we start with our darkest purple, and then we eventually get to our lightest one. So I went to a more dark magenta with my oil pastel, and then a lighter magenta. And then I can even go in with, you know, lighter and lighter pinks depending on how light I want it to end up. Okay, so that's called a gradient, is when you go from the darkest version of a color to the lightest. Now, the last thing I want to point out too is that for your nature elements, like your leaves, if you decide to do a leaf pattern, they don't have to be a regular green leaf. You know, they could be a bluish leaf, almost like, you know, similar to that eucalyptus color. Sometimes it has a little bit of a tint to it. Or you can do all multicolor, you know, across the whole page if you wanted to. So that part, that, you know, choice, I'll leave completely up to you. And another thing that I'll offer to you, and this you might want to think about before you start coloring, is if you did want to add in a pattern like this onto your koru. I just kind of liked how this looked, especially because even with all these fun things going on the page, it really brings your eye back to the koru, which is the focal point or the main, most important part of our drawing. So I hope that this helps you, and I really thank you so much for joining me today. Take care.